Hey, Shaun, thanks for having me on the show. My name's William Dathan Holbert. Everybody in the whole world calls me Wild Bill, and we'll talk about that why they call me that later. From 2006 until 2010, I was a professional killer, doing hit contracts and freelance killing work for profit. In 2010, I was arrested and given a 46-year sentence for quintuple homicide. That's five of them, and stuffed away in a dank Panamanian prison. I was extradited. I was arrested in a Nicaraguan war zone in 2010 and shipped back to Panama to face Panama justice. I had many misadventures in Panama justice before being handed down a 46-year sentence. I've been in prison for 13 years, and that's been a hell of an experience being in a Panamanian prison. I'm actually in the worst prison in Central America, most dangerous, and that's saying a lot. It's probably certainly the top five worst prisons in the Western Hemisphere, and I'd imagine in the top 10 worst. And when I say worst, I mean most violent and difficult and terrible conditions in the world. So that's interesting. And in this prison, I've been here for 13 years, and I had a life-changing experience in 2013, which we'll talk about later as well, and actually rose to become the prison's state-recognized chaplain. The government recognizes me as the prison's chaplain, given quite a bit of liberty and responsibility, an enormous amount of responsibility inside the prison. I have a ministry here that focuses on getting gang members out of gangs. So I lived a really terrible life on the outside until I was 30 years old. And even the first 3 or 4 years in prison, I wasn't a very good man at all. But I changed my life, from 2013, the last decade. I've been working to become a better person and actually working to help others get out of the gang lifestyle. I was never a gang member, but that's what the prisons are full of here. The median age in the Panamanian prison is about 23, so I'm an old guy. I'm 43, so I'm an old guy here. I'm like a grandpa here, and that's what I'm doing with my life.
Hey, Bill. So thank you for telling us some of your wildest stories. How did all this start, man? How did a guy like you end up being classified as a cartel hitman and a serial killer? What was it like for you growing up? How did your parents meet? How were you at school? Can you go over your childhood years?
So we were an affluent family, still is an affluent family. I'm the black sheep, but I don't know. I played American football, had good grades in high, went and got a small, a very minor degree in the university. A lot of good things happened to me in my life, but I tell you, just being honest with you, Shaun, and your listeners, that always I was kind of a bad seed. I was always involved in something just slightly illegal, selling stolen equipment, when I was 18 years old, the first real illegal business that I had, I got a tax stamp to sell cigarettes, and I would sell cigarettes. In North Carolina, they make all the cigarettes, for the whole world, really. Most of the cigarettes you guys smoke over there are made in North Carolina, where I grew up, and for that reason, they're very cheap. And you can buy them and smuggle them into other states inside the United States and sell them without tax stamps on them and make a lot of money. So I opened a business buying cigarettes in like a tractor trailer load of cigarettes at a time, and then selling them to the Italian mafia in New York and New Jersey, without tax stamps. And they would, like a carton of cigarettes I could buy for like $3 or $4, and they would sell them for $20 up there, So they're making a lot of money, and I would double my money on that. So that's just an example of how the things I did, and these are all things that are slightly illegal, and make enormous amount of money. When I got divorced in 2004, my life kind of collapsed, and out of that, I ended up just electing a life of absolute crime, open crime. I was a fool. I want to be really clear about that. Anybody listening, everybody in life is looking for a shortcut. I was looking for a shortcut, and what a mistake. There is no shortcuts in life. Anything good is, I preach that in the messages that I give here in the jail. Anything good is worth working for, and I wanted it now, and I wanted it fast, and so I ended up becoming a fugitive in the United States for things I can't really talk about. And then went to Costa Rica. And from Costa Rica, I began a life of international crime. I certainly wasn't a killer. I never killed anybody before. I wasn't. I'd worked in several things that were violent. I'd been a bouncer in a bar. I'd been a debt collector. You know, the violence wasn't something I liked to fist fight back in those days. I was a big raw bones kid, weightlifter. I actually didn't learn martial arts until I went to prison. I learned that in prison, but I liked to bar fight a lot. I was good at it. And it was like a pastime for me, something I enjoyed. I enjoyed fighting, and you know, very rarely did I come out the loser in any of those fights. And so I mean, like, that sort of lifestyle for me was what I elected. It was a miserable lifestyle. I mean, like, just being honest with you, it was a completely terrible and miserable lifestyle. I don't look back on it with much nostalgia. It was a terrible time in my life. And so anyway, so I ended up in Costa Rica with some money that I'd skimmed from the United States, and looking to start a life of crime. Because if you're a fugitive, you can't just go get a job. And that's an excuse that I used then, but I mean, it's true. You can't just go get a job. You're as long as you're going to be a fugitive, you're married to crime, so to speak. And so that's how I got started. I mean, I want to be really clear. My family is like one of the best families. I was like my total disappointment, embarrassment to my family. And I ended up, from a good upbringing, being in Costa Rica at 26 years old, with about $300,000 in illegal cash, and looking to build an empire.
So what was your first introduction to violence? Was it a fight at school? Take us through it. How did that feel? I can't imagine you were just a naturally violent person as a kid. Were you someone who was bullied, or did anything happen that, you know, triggered you in some way?
No, I don't ever really remember. I think that everybody, to some degree, was bullied, but I don't remember it being like a huge part of my life. And I don't, like, maybe when I was really little or something. And I wasn't a terribly violent child either. I don't think that. But I think that also you have to understand, like, things are really different. Like, you guys are in the UK, or you are anyway, and American culture is a bit different. It's normal for young boys to fist fight and stuff. That's like almost encouraged by the society in which I grew up in the 80s and 90s in Western North Carolina, which is very southern, American southern. And so it wasn't odd that young boys would fist fight and stuff. That's a pretty normal thing. And then, of course, the sport that I played was American football, which is also a very violent sport. I mean, so violence, in a way, becomes just part of the culture of our situation there. But was I a terribly violent? Not more than any other normal red-blooded American boy from North Carolina in that time period. I think things have changed a lot in the last 20 years, 25 years, but back then, violence. I was a good kid. I mean, like, really, until I was about 16 or 17, I was a good kid. I think that maybe you're asking me something I've never even discussed on any show. I've done a lot of shows and I've never really discussed it before. One of the things I think that really changed me was I went from being the environment was very Christian, to when I got a driver's license, I became free and, like, opened up to many things that probably too quickly, you know, sex with girls, booze, partying, things that it went from one day being totally repressed to the next day being totally free. And that's probably a bad thing in a way. I was very capacitated as a child. When I say capacitated, I mean I was very, like, I could drive a tractor when I was 11 years old. I was trusted to go hunting when I was 9 or 10 years old alone, you know. And so, what I mean by that is that farming children from Western North Carolina in the 1980s and 1990s were trusted with a lot of freedom and a lot of responsibility from a very young age, which I think is a very good thing. But I went from being, this is just my own thoughts about my own life, you know. I went from being very controlled to being not controlled at all. And so I immediately began to explore all of those things, you know. screwing all the girls and, drinking all the booze and going to all the parties and being fairly popular in school. And, certainly by the time I was in high school, there wasn't anything to do with bullies or anything like that. And also, I didn't like bullies. I remember an instance from my childhood. I remember I was about 16, 15, maybe, adolescence. 15 or 16, and I remember I had a friend of mine named Daryl, and Daryl, who recently died, they told me he died from an overdose recently. I haven't spoken to him in 20 years, but somebody from back home let me know that he had died, he'd passed, and he was a very close friend of mine, good guy. And there was a big kid who was actually a few years younger than Daryl that was picking on him, and I remember the kid's name was Steve, and Steve would pick on Daryl, and I remember I had a letter jacket on, which is a jacket they give you for being a jock, an American football player. And so I handed my letter jacket to this girl that was standing there and defended my friend, and in a very violent way. And I didn't like bullies, And even when I would bar fight, when I was as a man, I would try to find the biggest and nastiest bastard I could find, one much bigger than me, if I could find one, and one who thought he was really special in order to fight with the best. And so I wasn't like a person who bullied others or was very bullied by anybody else, but I didn't like bullies very much at all. So I think the question that morphs out of this, and you haven't asked it, and I hope you can forgive me for going ahead and answering, how does a man get from a normal childhood, normal family, normal upbringing, and go from that, normal, good grades, well behaved in school, no problems, and become a hitman and a professional murderer in Panama? How does that happen? And I'll tell you just a short synopsis of my thoughts on that. I wanted to be a politician. I wanted to study political science, but be honest with you, didn't have the attention span to go and get the degree. I pulled a 2-year degree in agriculture from this place called Blue Ridge Community College. In that time period also I got married and began having children. I was very young. I was in my early 20s. And that relationship fell apart. At the same time, because I was so interested in politics, I began my own political party, which was almost like a militia. To call it a militia would be an honest thing, which militias in that time were not outlawed like they are now. And so I had literally my own armed militia as a 23, 24-year-old man, with 500 members in this small southern town. So I was really excited about that, and it was a right-wing militia, but it wasn't based on racism at all. We had African-American members as well. We had been accused once by the local NAACP of being a racist organization, but that never panned out. When we presented our African American members to the press, that kind of just evaporated. That charge of racism evaporated. Thank God. But we were basically an anti-immigration platform. Is what we were taking. I was taking advantage of the anti-illegal immigration sentiment in the United States, which still exists. Anyway, I got divorced, and the judge in the case actually sentenced me to 2 weeks in prison, or in jail, in their local jail. 2 weeks in the local jail for insubordination, for contempt of court. And I think that I had been playing by all the rules, which that's probably not true. That's probably not true. I probably wasn't playing by all the rules, but I had been doing a damn good job of fronting, of playing by all the rules, by appearance at least. And when they sentenced me to 2 weeks in prison, I lost my is the best way I could tell you. I mean, I really almost lost my mind. I had aspirations of running for state as a state senator the next year, and they even reported it in the local news that I had been sentenced to it kind of evaporated my chances of being a local politician, at least in that time period. And I remember telling my lawyer, I said, I ain't serving that 2 week sentence. And he said, you got to do it on the weekends. I said, I ain't going, never. I'm never going to jail. I haven't done anything to just insulting some damn judge. I'm not, I mean, he could have given me $100 fine for that. He put me in jail for 2 weeks. And so I should Like, I want to be real clear to your listeners. I should have done the time. My God, oh my God, if I could go back in time and just do the time and continue on the same path I was on, I would have been okay. But I didn't. And I told my lawyer, his name was Bill Gardeau, that was his name. I said, Bill, I said, if they want to see a criminal, I'm going to show them the best damn criminal there is. That's what I said. I'll never forget saying that. And that's what I did. And just from that point, I took a complete right-angled turn, or maybe a 180-degree turn, and became the best damn criminal that anybody had ever seen in that part of the world. So that's pretty much how, I made a really terrible decision based on impatience and an inability to deal with something I thought was unjust. And my God, man, I wish I could go back in time and just do the time. My life would have been a whole lot better, But I made the mistake. And that's one thing I came on your show here to talk to everybody about. And I hope you don't mind me running off just a hair. I came on your show here to talk to everybody about a couple of things. And one of them is that we have to be really careful about the decisions that we make. Because one bad decision, like the one I just talked about, leads to another bad decision, leads to another bad decision, leads to another bad decision until you're way deep down in hell with no way to get back out. And that's the story of my life. So if you can take anything listening to this from my life, I want you to be really careful about the things that you do, the decisions that you make. I think it's hard for most people to understand the roles that firearms play in a normal Southern American man and even woman's lives. Firearms it's not strange that someone would go hunting. And I don't remember the first time I went. It's like asking somebody the first time you went swimming. I don't remember. Maybe people will remember, but I don't remember. I don't remember ever not going hunting. But I think that, and I'm stepping out just a second to go back to answer the rest of the question. I think that a lot of people who don't live in the United States think that, for them, guns are wow, something, it's terrible. But for us, it's just normal. It's normal, and I don't think that any of the firearm training that I had as a child, if you teach somebody responsibly how to use a firearm, those are not the kids that are going in and shooting up schools, by the way. School shootings and murders and things like that are not usually accomplished by people that went through the trouble of buying a gun in a real way. I mean, those are usually guns bought off the street or stolen from somebody or something. So I think that first thing that we need to understand is that nothing that I ever learned about hunting or anything ever came into play as a professional killer later. Second of all, my family was really normal. I don't talk about them too much, and I'll tell you why. I like to protect them. I had a really good mother and father who lived together in a house. We were religious, and not more religious than anybody else, or not less than anybody else. We went to church on Sundays, prayed before meals, Saturdays, most days, 5 evenings out of 7, everybody ate together around a big table, and in a semi-formal way, Don't put your elbows on the table, that sort of thing. Typical American family. My childhood and upbringing don't have anything to do with. I couldn't imagine anybody having a better childhood than I did. I have 3 children who are grown who I don't want to talk about because they have their own lives, and I'm happy for them and love them, and they're doing very well. And I have a young son now who's 2 years old, and I would love for him to have the same childhood that I did, because it was a very nurturing and wholesome childhood. Had a great father. My father, he passed on in 2016, unfortunately. My mother's still alive. Even 3 of my 4 grandparents are still alive. I had an adopted older brother, and that was it, the 4 of us in the house. And so it was but my family was very united, with lots of uncles and cousins and my grandparents and everybody. It was a very, very close family. So it was a good family. It was a good upbringing, good, wholesome upbringing. I knew right from wrong. my mistakes haven't really any influence or any reflection at all on my family. My family was like the best family in the world. I can't imagine a better family looking back, and they just certainly, and it's like hard for people to understand. They didn't produce the man that was the killer. My family and nothing, no environmental thing growing up produced that. What did produce it? And I know that you want to talk about these things later, but I think that what did produce it was just a series of terrible decisions, and what I concentrated on growing up. I mean, I concentrated on terribly negative things. I read books about villains and like real life villains and stuff, and I think it's important to understand that there are times when 90% of or maybe more of people who are in prison for violent crime had difficult upbringings. I'm not one of them. I had a really good upbringing, a really good life. I understand what that is, and I understand the importance of that in anybody's life as well, as I've tried my very best to provide that for my youngest son. I wasn't there for my children, my 3 oldest children, because I was in prison. I was a fugitive. I wasn't there for them. I was a terrible father. And I take that, all my fault. And despite the fact that I'm a terrible father, they turned out great, all 3 of them. So God bless them. The good childhood that I had, I didn't provide that for my 3 oldest children. I am doing so for my youngest son. I'm trying to learn from my mistakes and do so for my youngest son. So that's probably about as much of an answer as I can give about my upbringing and stuff like that.
What was the most memorable day you went hunting? Take us through that day. Because when I used to go to America as a teenager, my uncles would take me out into the desert and fire guns. A very powerful feeling.
Well, again, I think that guns for you guys over there may be more. I don't think I felt anything. I don't think like, wow, I have a gun. I think you'd be a weird ass kid in the South if you grew up and you didn't have firearms. I mean, I had like a 30-30 lever action 30-30 with a scope on the gun rack in the back of my truck at school. We're talking about, in the mid 1990s. There was no school shootings in that Columbine. Shit hadn't happened yet, so. I was honest, but I don't know, man. I can't share the same experience with you about guns, because I think that it was just such a normal, and that's the thing. Like, I think audiences are really different, really geared differently. I don't like hunting. Isn't a part of my life. It was like something I just mentioned in passing here. I think that you're going to be disappointed with me about it, because I don't remember. It's kind of a boring bunch of shit, isn't it? You go walking a long way into the woods in the cold, because you hunt during the winter, and you sit on your ass and freeze your ass to death waiting on some overgrown dog to come out and shoot it. It's not. I mean, and I like, maybe there are people in the States listening to this that like hunting and but that's what it was for me anyway. It was just like it's not something. As soon as it became, I don't think I ever hunted again after I was out of my, when I left home. That was just something that we did. Is trying to explain it to you. I mean, in a way you might understand. Like, it seemed maybe it's an anomaly for you guys over there, but like guns, wow, no. For us, there was none of that shit. It would have been like weird. It'd be like in the States. In the States, you grow up and you have to have a car, right? You have to have a car, because if you don't have a car, you can't get anywhere. There's no public transportation. So everybody has a car. In Panama, nobody has a car. So when a kid works his ass off and gets a car, it's like, wow, he has a car. Holy shit. Well, in the States, a kid with a gun is like a normal thing. So it's not like, wow, I have a gun. It's not like that. So I don't know. I don't think that was a very defining part of my growing up, and certainly had nothing to do with, guns are normal. They're like normal where I grew up. I don't think that it's, you go to the South, everybody's armed. Everybody is armed. And so it's not something strange. It's also very little breaking and entering and shit like that either. There's very little gun violence, if you want the truth. I don't remember anybody ever getting killed and shot in the little town I grew up on ever. I'm sure it probably happened, but I don't remember ever hearing about it even, or never thought about actually shooting somebody, a human being with a gun. It's not something that I would have ever even thought about. I don't know. I don't think that I can answer your question in a way that would satisfy your culture, because my culture is really different as far as that goes. I'll say this: I never felt superior or super powerful holding a firearm. Everybody else had one too. So it's like if you're in the military, you have a gun. If you grow up in the South, you have a gun.
Can you take us through your earliest arrests and what led up to them?
My earliest arrest was when I was arrested for quintuple homicide. I never had any early arrests. I never got in any trouble, ever. I was a criminal, but I was damn good at it, you know. So I never got arrested. I actually, man, I mean, they wanted me. I was on the America's Most Wanted and everything, and I had to leave the United States and never got popped. I mean, the FBI couldn't catch me. And I mean, like, this sounds like bragging, but do your research. I'm telling the truth. I disappeared one night into a snowstorm when there were helicopters after me. You know, I ain't your run-of-the-mill dipshit. And you know, again, your listeners are going to hear this, and I'm listening to me talk, and I would listen to me as like, oh, listen to this asshole brag. I'm just telling you the truth. I was very, very a good, like, secret agent type fellow, you know, very versatile. I always had 3 or 4 different identities, 3 or 4 different passports, an enormous amount of money on hand at any given time. I don't do anything poorly. I have a very high IQ, and you know, like, I'm stoking my I'm stoking my own image right now, but I want to be really clear that when I look back on that time period, I don't remember anything fondly. It was a terrible time, and I was very unhappy. And so, and I want to get into this later, but you'd mentioned the word serial killer. I mean, underneath the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's definition of a serial killer, killing more than one person with a cooling off period, I suppose I am, but I was more like a hitman, you know, a cartel killer, than what would be thought of as a serial killer. I never enjoyed any of the criminality. It was just a means to an end. It was a means to, I mean, I know guys who were I know other professional killers personally, and a lot here in prison, who enjoy hurting people. I never enjoyed hurting anybody. I never, you know, my thought process isn't that, oh boy, I get to inflict pain on somebody else. I'm actually a fairly sympathetic fellow. You know, I don't like to see little kids get hurt or things like that. I mean, that like, watching other people in pain bothers me, even the way, and I don't want to get too, I'm not going to talk about the individual murders. That's not going to happen, because I think that I've done it before, but I think that it's disrespectful. But I never killed anybody before they knew it was going to happen. I mean, I'm not, like, it doesn't make it better or anything, right? But I never inflicted pain on purpose to somebody else. Would you imagine telling somebody else, I'm going to kill you, and then watching them be in fear and then killing them? I don't have the stomach for that myself. And so I never did it that way. It was always like, you know, from behind the back when they weren't looking, didn't know it was coming, sort of thing. And so that doesn't make it any better. In a way, I'm a coward, but I want to be really clear. I mean, it was kind of cowardly. I'm not somebody. I don't want to torture people. I don't want to, you know, that sort of stuff. I don't know. Like, to going back to your original question, I'm expanding a little bit on an answer, but I want people that are listening to get a clear message of who is Wild Bill. And, you know, like some guy that likes to hurt people. That's not me. It never was me. Never has been me. Never will be me. And today I'm a very different man, as I hope we get the opportunity to talk about here later, what I'm doing today to pay back my debt to society. And so whenever you're ready to talk about that, but we'll go along and let you ask the questions. You're the boss, man.
How do you go from just being a person who's never killed anybody to adjusting your mindset so that you can carry that out? Is it a long process of adjustment? Is it a snap judgment? What are all the factors involved? Just trying to get into the psychology of how the mind can change over into that mode from a life of never having done that before.
Well, it doesn't change one day to the next, does it? And that's the thing. That's what I want your listeners to understand, that it's one set of mistakes after another set of mistakes after another set of mistakes. You don't just go wake up one day and be like, I'm going to kill people for a living. That doesn't happen that way. And for me, also, without talking about individual murders, which I don't think is right, the first time I ever killed anybody was in self-defense. a man was trying to kill me, and he was a cartel associate. And I killed him not wanting to. It was a complete and total accident. That murder was actually investigated by the authorities, and they agree that it was in self-defense, and I didn't get charged with that homicide either. But at the time when that occurred, I was already a fugitive, and I was working in a criminal enterprise, and I killed a cartel associate, and the cartel found out. I told them I had to tell them, and from that moment on, they owned me, you know. So it's not a situation about whether you want to or not. It's one set of mistakes after another set of mistakes after another set of mistakes until you find out one day you've come down so far that there's no way back, or at least you think there's no way back. There's always a way back. No matter how dirty anything gets, you can always clean it back up, including your soul. But it's going to take a lot of work. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of bad decisions to get to where I am now. And so it's taking me a lot of good decisions to get back. I talk about the law of the harvest in the preaching, in the program. I have a program here that I attend inmates at, and I talk about the law of the harvest. And this goes along with the question that you asked me: how does this happen? How did you get here? Well, it was I'm eating the fruits of a lot of bad decisions. It didn't, like I said, I didn't wake up one day and say, hey, it started off with, well, I'm going to sell contraband cigarettes. And then it started off, well, I'm going to sell stolen heavy equipment. And then it started, well, I'm just going to be a full-time criminal and the hell with it. And then it started, well, I'm just going to leave the United States and find out what I can get involved with down there. And then it started, well, I'm going to be a captain of a smuggling boat, and I'll do that. That's what I did for a while. And on that boat, I ended up killing a man in self-defense. And then from there, it was, you're going to do what we say because that's how it is. And that's pretty much how it went down and down. And I did a lot of freelance work. Nothing I ever did, and I never killed anybody when it was like I had to. I absolutely had to. I could have always walked away. I could have always turned myself in, and I didn't do that. So, but I had painted myself into a corner, and not being being totally unwilling to do what was necessary to clean up my life, I ended up continuing to march further and deeper down into hell. And my thought process was that I'll never get out of this. Somebody will kill me. There's no retirement for professional killers. The retirement is when they put a bullet in the back of your head. And that's what I assumed would happen to me. Going to prison, at least in Panama, was never something I even considered happening. What an absurd thing. And it ended up happening in a very absurd way. But in a way, it was the best thing that ever happened to me at the same time, because it saved my life and gave me the opportunity to change. And so I'm not upset about going to prison. I'm thankful for it. Here, I certainly don't want to be in prison. Don't get me wrong. I want the hell out of prison. I'm fighting and scratching and clawing and kicking to try to get out right now. But legally, obviously. But while I'm here, I'm going to do the very best thing I can do to try to reverse the law of the harvest, meaning I sowed bad seeds and reaped bad fruits. Now I'm sowing nothing but good seeds, hoping that the reverse process will happen, and it is happening, little by little. It took a long time and a lot of work to become a professional killer, really, a lot of bad work. And so it's going to take a long time and a lot of work to become a good citizen. Maybe that'll happen for me one day.
Can you give us the full story and take as much time as you possibly can as to how you clicked up with the cartel, what your entry-level position was, just as much information as possible about, how you rose up the ladder and earned the trust of cartel figures?
I was in Costa Rica. I've been there for a while, about 6 months, maybe a little less, 5 months. And I took a trip down to Panama. I'd never been in Panama before, and a friend of mine went down there. He used to fish for cocaine, for white. He used to fish for white in the water. And when I say that, what does that mean? Well, he went down. He would go. He was a fisherman, but he would go down, and like a lot of times when the drug boats go north from Colombia, they have to run from the cops, and so they throw all the drugs overboard, and those drugs kind of just go like a shotgun. They go everywhere. And they're wrapped in these 25 kilogram condoms. It looks like a condom to me. It looks like a penis in a condom. That's what it looks like. A big, huge penis, obviously. And they throw them in the water. And sometimes you can pick them up, like often. So this guy in Costa Rica, white was $7,000 a kilo. So just do the math. 25 times 7,000 is, that's a lot of money. So he would go down and he'd pick them up and come back. And he said he was going to go hunting kilograms of white. And he said, would I like to visit Panama while I was there? And he said yes. And so I went to Panama, and in a bar, I describe it like this: if you are a heroin addict and they drop you off in a town, or a drug addict of any kind, and they drop you off in some town somewhere, in 15 minutes you know where to buy your drug. I don't know why it's that way, but that's the way it is. I'm not a drug addict, but I'm a criminal, and it works the same way. If you drop a criminal off in a town, in 15 minutes he knows who all the criminals were. So I met this guy who had an operation moving, like a coyote operation, moving human beings, Asian people primarily, completely, totally Asian people from China into the United States, primarily China, and smuggling them in. And he needed a boat driver. And that's a really long story, and it's just not worth getting into. But anyway, so I was excited about it. The job paid a whole lot, and my leg of the journey was to pick people up in Bocas del Toro, Panama, on his boat, which was a large open-style ponga boat that held between 65 and 80 passengers, drive them to, pilot them to just outside Jamaica. We would change over in international waters, change the passengers over from one boat to another.
Financial anxiety, anyone? Worrying about it doesn't help? EarnIn does. EarnIn is an app that gives you access to your pay-as-you-work up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the EarnIn app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. If Jen wants a special night out or another bloody expensive handbag, I'm going to have to turn to EarnIn. Make EarnIn a part of your financial routine and join EarnIn's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about EarnIn, I think about financial stability and security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download EarnIn today, spelled EARNIN, in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the EarnIn app, type in Shaun Attwood under podcast. That's ShaunAtt Wood. When you sign up, it'll really help this show. That's Shaun Attwood under podcast. EarnIn is a financial tech company, not a bank, subject to your available earnings, daily max, pay period, max, and location. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC. Thank you for supporting our sponsor, EarnIn. Back to the podcast. The link is in the description box below this video if you're watching it on YouTube. Cheers.
But the Jamaican boys would pick them up, and I would come back. And I'd make a little over $1,000 for each run, and I would do 3 a week. So I was making $3,000 or $4,000 a week, doing good. And that guy was hooked in with a loose, when I say cartel, it's not like you think of cartel, you think Pablo Escobar, right? No, it wasn't like that at all. It was more like a loose federation of people, of individual high-level criminals, high-level operatives. Like there was a drug trafficker, there was a guy who floated illegal financial money, who laundered money. There was a lawyer who did like illegal transactions. There was like 12 guys in this group, right? And so these guys were all part of the group. And I was just an underling at the time when I went in. I was just a boat captain, nothing more. But when it occurred that I killed a man in self-defense, I ran from them for a long time. I was away from them for about almost a year before they found me again. And that is another story altogether. But when I went back to them, was forced back to them, I began accepting hit contracts and doing freelance killing on my own as well. I won't lie about that. I did a lot of fugitive hunting. I would hunt fugitives, and so I did like hit contracts, but I would also hunt other criminals who were hiding in Panama and kill them, consume their wealth. Not something I'm proud of. It's just what I did, and I'm answering the question. So how did I get my introduction? Just a happenstance. I stumbled on one of their high-level operatives who needed a man in my position who checked me out, and I checked out good and knew what I was doing. I was a good boat captain. I'd been a boat captain. I had a U.S. Coast Guard's license and everything. So So I was good for the job and did the job and I did a very good job. I'm very, very thorough in everything that I do, you know. I take any job or anything I do, I take it very seriously. And so in that respect, it was easy for me to gain their confidence.
What's the worst thing you ever saw in the human smuggling business?
You know, there's a lot of stories that happened to me. I only worked as a human trafficker for about 8 months, but the worst thing I ever saw was this, and you have to understand. Now, these are all Asian people who have paid money, or their families have paid money to be smuggled into the United States. Now, I don't know this, but I think that I remember the going rate being $8,000 to $10,000, very expensive. And so what happens is, instead of just taking them straight into California, that's where, you know, it's a very difficult thing to do, because there's that's where they, you know, the Border Patrol looks for that sort of thing. And so they would bring them through the Panama Canal, take them up on the Caribbean, through the Caribbean up to Jamaica, and from Jamaica onward. And I don't actually know where they went from Jamaica. I would imagine Florida or Texas, or maybe Alabama, or something, you know, maybe like Mobile, Alabama, or something. One of those, or Louisiana, one of those 4 states, I'm certain. So, and one of the things that's really bad is that a lot of the times, even though that they are paying customers, they're treated like cattle. And even a more disturbing thing is often that the attractive women are raped with regularity, you know, by the people who handle them. I never raped anybody. That doesn't even sound like fun to me. I wouldn't want to rape any woman. Doesn't sound fun to me to f somebody that doesn't want me to f them. That doesn't sound very fun to me. Anyway, but one day there was this, I was counting heads. I had to get, like, at the dock, you have to count how many people come in. I don't have to like give them their names or anything, but we have to have a head count to make sure we haven't lost anybody. And so, and then they give me like an invoice sheet to give to the Jamaicans that actually does have all their names on them. And so, but I mean, like, I can't pronounce their names, you know, because it's in Chinese, and it's like dang, 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 or I don't know. You know, I'm not trying to make fun. I'm being honest. I don't know how to say a word in Chinese. Anyway, so there was one day, I remember there was this beautiful young woman. She may have weighed 100 pounds. She was about 5 foot tall, but she was stunningly attractive. And I thought to myself, she had this big smile, and I thought to myself, what a miracle that I mean, she looks intact. Like, you know, like the girls that come through that have been raped, you can tell they're like gun shy, you know. She looks intact. And I remember looking at her and smiling. She was just so beautiful, and I thought, my God, what a beautiful young woman. So we go on. I can't even say anything to her. I just kind of smiled, and she smiled at me, and then off we go. Now, to understand this it's not like some cruise ship. I mean, this is think about a big rowboat, a huge rowboat with 200 horsepower Yamahas on the back of it. I mean, that's what it is. It's like a 60-foot boat with just lots of people sitting on it. So across the open ocean we go, a day and a half to get to Jamaica at about 13 knots. We arrive there. The Jamaicans come out in a very similar boat, almost exactly the same. They tie up beside us, and the people go over one at a time, and we count them as they go across. Then if the numbers match, I give the invoice sheet to the Jamaicans, and they go away, and I have no idea what happens after that. I would imagine they go and they rest in Jamaica one day, and then they go on. So that particular day, the sea was had very high swells, about 15-foot swells. And the Caribbean isn't like the Atlantic. A 15-foot swell in the Atlantic is normal, but the Caribbean is different, you know, because it's kind of like a big lake. So a 15-foot swell is a very large, rough sea for us there. And we tied the two boats up together, but when the sea's rough like that, you can't tie up close. You have to leave a lot of slack in the ropes, because if you don't, the two boats will capsize. When the swells go over, the one boat will capsize the other. Anyway, so and that makes them bounce back and forth, you know, and you've got bumpers there like inflatable bumpers in between the two boats, but the boats do bounce back and forth and do smash against one another, and so on and so forth. So about 2/3 of the way through, there was left about 1/3 of the passengers on my boat, and 2/3 were already on the Jamaicans' boat. And there's three Jamaican boys, and there's me and a helper on my boat. So there's 2 staff members on my boat and 3 staff members on the Jamaican boat. and it was the turn of the pretty girl, the attractive young woman, to step across. The helper, my helper, holds her by the hand. She stands on the gunwale of the boat, the railing of the boat, to step across into the other boat. And when she does, a little wave passed through, and she slipped and fell, and the two boats smashed together on her leg. And when I say they smashed together on her leg, they broke her leg to the point where the bone was sticking out. The big bone, not below the knee, above the knee. The big bone was sticking out of the skin. That's a real problem. So I was musing about what to do about it when the Jamaicans just grabbed a hold of her and snatched her off the boat into their boat. So I guess problem solved for me. But I was thinking, like, I don't know what to do about this problem, because we're on the high seas and we're in the middle of this woman requires immediate medical attention and surgery if she's to live. But the Jamaican, and anyway, so we get everybody over on the other boat. I give the invoice sheets, and the boys say goodbye, and we start off. And I was thinking, what the hell? And I almost asked, what the hell are you going to do with that girl? And I want you to understand, this haunts me even today. I was thinking about her like, I don't know what to do, because I'm a day and a half away from help, and I can't take her back with me because she'll die on the way. She'll bleed out, because you can't have a bone sticking out of your skin for a day and a half. And I thought, well, maybe the Jamaicans, I don't know what they'll do with her. And then I saw them shoot her in the head and throw her overboard. And I thought to myself, it's both a terrible thing and a kindness that they did to her, because I don't know what, they can't take her to a hospital, because like, we're in the middle of a criminal activity, and they could have just thrown her overboard without shooting her, I guess. But at least they shot her before they threw her overboard, and that sounds like very callous on my part, and it is. But it is a kindness that they did, at least they shot her first. But I'll tell you that today, 17 years after that event, that bothers the shit out of me. I wish somehow I could have saved the little Chinese girl. She's maybe 24 years old, 20. I don't know. They're difficult for me to. Over 20 years old, way under 30 years old. Beautiful, beautiful woman with a smile. And God, she had to. And she was trying to make it to the States. Was obviously her or her family's. I mean, like, her family will never even know what happened to her, and I don't even know what her name is. And she died. I mean, she. I don't know. I don't even know what I think about it. It bothers me even today. But that's the worst thing I ever saw.
Can you tell us how you got the name Wild Bill?
Actually, it's funny, but I didn't actually get that name until just a couple of years before I got put in prison. It had nothing to do, like Wild Bill's a gunslinger. It had nothing to do with that sort of thing. It was like this. There was a man who owed me money. His name was also Bill, on the island, and on the island of Bocas, which is Columbus Island. It's the populated part, and I lived way out in the jungle. I had like a mansion house way out on an island called Aguacate, which means avocado. Anyway, man owed me about $35,000, and he couldn't pay it, so I went to his house, and he had shipped down from the United States an old Cessna with pontoons, and it was in pieces. The wing was off of it, the pontoons were off of it, and it was sitting there in the front yard. And it looked like shit. I mean, it didn't look that good, but as we went there, I went there with a couple of my goons, my local boys that worked with me for, to collect money, and I looked it over, and I saw that I wanted it. I wanted to have a seaplane. I thought that was fitting for a while for Bill. I was still Bill at this time, so we went inside, and I talked to him, and and he elected to give me the airplane for $15,000 of the debt, and it wasn't like he had a choice anyway. And so we came back the next day. I came back with an army of Indians, literally like an army of indigenous people that worked for me at the farm. I had this huge plantation farm. It was like really crazy the way that I lived, if you want the truth. And so I had this huge plantation farm right on the water, and a big mansion house and everything. And it was only boat access. You could only get to it by boat. You couldn't get to it by any other way. And I had like 2 yachts and a bunch of fast boats and stuff. But I thought, more than anything, I just wanted the plane to have it floating there, because it would look cool with the house, Like he even has his own plane. I really believed in my own bullshit shit back then, and but it was pretty cool actually. So we put it all together in the jungle, in the middle of the jungle, on a faraway island. We put it all together and we towed it back to my house really slowly. Towed it like 3 knots. It took like all day to get it back to my house. We got it to my house. So my best friend at the time was an ex-airplane mechanic in the Navy. So he came over and he said, "Hey, this thing's not in bad shape. It looks like shit, but it's not in bad shape actually, and we could put it back together really easy." And so I said, "What do you need to put it back together?" And he told me, I don't remember how much, not very much money. And so I gave it to him. I said, "Put it back together." And so he went through the engine, I don't know what all he did actually, but it took about 3 weeks. He worked on it for about 3 weeks there at my house, and he got it in perfect running order, perfect condition. So for another 3 weeks, it just sat there. I didn't know what to do with it. I needed somebody to teach me to fly it. And I myself had flown in a plane many, many times, a small Cessna. Growing up, I had a friend who had a pilot's license when we were 16, and we used to try to take girls to Alabama, or to like woo them, what I mean? Like, "Hey baby, you want to go for a ride in an airplane?" "Yes, of course." That's kind of cool thing for a chick, 16-year-old boys being able to do it. So he had a pilot's license when he was 16. We would rent an airplane for like $100 an hour flying time and fly anyway. So I knew a little bit about flying. I had never landed. I had taken off and flown and understood the navigation, understood how the controls worked, but I didn't know how to fly. And so I was waiting on somebody to come and teach me how to fly the thing. And meanwhile, it just floated there at my dock, and it was like kind of cumbersome. You had to duck under the wing every time you wanted to walk up and down the dock. So there it sat. And so we had a party at my house, which is normal. It was normal back in those days, and there was like 80 people there. And so my friend Danny is in the party and starts talking with me. He's like, "I can't believe that you've had that plane there." He was from Texas. "I can't believe you had that plane there for 3 weeks, and you ain't even tried to fly yet. You're losing your balls." And so he's like 50, and at the time I was pretending to be a man that was 35, but I wasn't even 30 yet. I was only like 28. So I listened to him with me all night about it, giving me a hard time about it all night. And so at the end of the night, I walked down. I got drunk. I was pretty well lit. I'd had, I don't know, 6 or 7 drinks and stuff about listening. So I walked down to the dock and took the keys out of the dock house. And everybody's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "To prove a point." Opened the door of the plane, primed the engine, slipped inside, fired her up, and off through the bay. Now I lived on a cove, on a long, quiet cove, very long, quiet cove. It was perfect. I mean, like the water's even the worst day, the water's perfectly flat. It's perfectly no waves, and it was ocean, but I mean, it was where a creek ran into the ocean, so it was like brackish water. It wasn't like that beautiful blue. It was like oceanfront, but it wasn't like that beautiful blue water. But the benefit of that was that it was extremely calm all the time, and the wind was low that night. And there were 2 mangrove islands about 2 miles out from where the dock was. My plan, in my drunken mind, was to fly out, bank left around the islands, come back and settle it easy into the water, and just to prove that I can fly. I'd never flown an airplane before, but I'm Wild Bill, or I was Bill. I wasn't Wild Bill yet. I was Bill. Bill where there's a Bill, there's a way. So I fly. I put the flaps down, maximum throttle, up in the air, dropped the flaps, gained about 200 feet of altitude, bank left around the mangrove islands. Everything going really good. Everybody's now. I look back. Everybody's on the dock watching me, ready to watch me kill myself. The whole crowd. There's 80 people out there. 80 people out there watching. I go out, bank left around, come back. Everything going good. All right, so I've got about a mile's worth of approach, maybe a little bit more. So I drop the flaps, pull the throttle back down to about 25%, let the plane settle into the water. But something bad happened. It was like I didn't realize how much drag was going to be on those pontoons when they hit the water. I didn't really even think about it, but like there's like a lot of drag, like the water grabs the pontoons pretty hard. And I mean, you're not going that fast, like 45 knots It's not really moving that quickly, but when those pontoons hit, the nose of the plane almost nosed over in the water, and I pulled back on the yoke really hard. So what actually happened was it looked like a Wile E. Coyote type landing. It was like doing, doing. I mean, it was like a really, really ugly landing, but at the end, I saved it. Or it saved itself. I didn't even know what the hell I was doing, really. But I pulled it out and saved it. So I floated back up to the dock and killed the engine and floated back up to the dock, opened the door, the boys grabbed the wing, pulled the plane over, I opened the door and stepped out, and everybody cheered. And it was like, wow, I can't believe the crazy bastard lived. And my friend Danny said, that's our Bill, that's our Wild Bill. And then that name just stuck. And Bocas and everywhere else for the rest of my life, I was Wild Bill and began to think of myself as Wild Bill.
The day-to-day lifestyle of Wild Bill.
Back in the day, like between the years, let's say 2007 is when I really made it. I had money and I'd become part of an active member, an active partner, is a better word, of the loose federation of criminals in which made up the cartel. I had a house on an island, and it was a big house. It was like 6,000 square feet, 600 meter square house. It had a little guest house. It had, it was really nice. It was off grid. It was on a cove on the Caribbean Ocean. It was on a cove that was in a bay. So, I mean, it was like really, really, really good anchorage if you had a boat, if you had a sailboat or a yacht, which had both of those actually. And then I built a bar near the house on the same property, but on the other side. The property was huge. It was 84 hectares. It was like 200 something acres, very large property. It was like a plantation. It was a plantain and chocolate plantation. So I would get up every day about 5 o'clock. When in the morning, I had these two mango trees. But I mean, when I say mango trees, they were like a complete ecosystem, each one of them, because they were huge. They're like 300 years old. So, or I don't know how old they were. I mean, that's just an estimation. But I mean, they're like literally like 100 feet tall, and this huge plume of foliage, and each one had a rival family of howler monkeys in it that hated one another, like a warring faction. And one was on one side of the house and the other one was on the other side of the house, and they were really big. And so like every morning at like 5 o'clock in the morning, the monkeys would start screaming. And when the first time you hear these monkeys, you think it's like a 500-pound gorilla, and you wouldn't think that sound could come out of a creature that weighs 6 or 7 pounds. But and so anyway, so in the morning at 5:30, when the sun starts to come, but right before the sun comes up, you hear that, and that was my wake up. I never had to have an alarm because that was the wake up. And so when you're living off grid like that, it's very, very, you have to invest a little bit of your time every day in maintaining the electrical and water supply. The water supply was gained off of the roof of the house, just filled up tanks. That wasn't that big a deal actually, but the electric supply was a little different. You had to charge the batteries and keep the batteries up and pay attention. It took 15 or 20 minutes of your time every day. So, and that wasn't something I dealt with in the morning. I dealt with it in the evening because I wanted the batteries full as we go into the night to run. So I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, right? I'd check everything out, and normally I would walk down and turn the generator on. I had this huge Perkins diesel generator, really nice machine. Turn the generator on, let it run for an hour while I'd make coffee. I'd make coffee, do my stuff, wait on the boys. Normal workers in Panama arrive at 6 o'clock in the morning, but I couldn't stand having anybody around that early. I wanted them, they love that too, because they still get off at the same time. They get off at the same time. They can come in later. They can come in later. So I had them get up there like 8. So I had from like 6 o'clock in the morning until 8 to myself, because everybody else slept late that lived in the house. And so I'd get up in the morning, watch the news, turn the news on, had satellite TV, watch the news, drink coffee, make breakfast, plan out the day. And then I worked. I ran the farm. The farm was a very labor-intensive and supervisor-intensive job. I mean, it's like a huge thing. I had this like really nice Can-Am 4-wheeler I'd ride around on the farm and tell the boys what to do and what needed to be done here and there. Had cattle, like 40 hectares of cattle, of cattle. about 30 hectares of plantains um, and maybe 6 hectares of chocolate, cacao, and then the rest of it was just bush, you know. And the bush was really cool too. It was up on a mountain, a little mountain. There's a little mountain in the back. So anyway, this is like what the property's like. You're asking me what I did. So I get up and I would take care of this property all day. And then I would find some excuse to go to Bocas normally 3 or 4 times a week to get away from the girlfriend. I go to Bocas, where I had another girlfriend, and stay there for 3 or 4 days during the week, party. I had a house on the island as well. And when I go to Bocas, I mean, I lived in a province called Bocas del Toro. But when you say I'm going to Bocas, that means you're going to the principal island, which is Columbus Island, Isla Colon. So you go to Isla Colon, and that's where all the shops are. That's where all the tourism stuff are. That's where all the bars are. That's where everything from there. I lived out in the jungle. When I say out in the jungle, I mean 15 miles by boat. So if you got a really fast boat, I live 30 minutes away out into the jungle. And so I would spend a lot of time partying on the island, and then eventually end up building my own bar and partying there just because I liked being in control. And not only that, there was this really cool group of weirdos that lived everywhere there. I say weirdos, but they were like wealthy, eccentric Americans that lived way out in the jungle like me. I was also an eccentric. Obviously I was a killer, but I was a very eccentric person and enjoyed being that far out. But I also enjoyed like being around the crowd some too. So I'd get up in the morning and usually put the farm in order, and then I would like if I was going to go party at Bocas, I would make some excuse with the live-in girlfriend who she liked being on the farm anyway. She liked being isolated and didn't like people very much, so that worked out well for her. I just leave her there, and then I would go to town and pick up another chick and that I used to see there and party all weekend. And then when that was over, I'd come back home. You know, I had like a really good life that way. And so when I partied really hard too. I mean, like lots of booze and lots of, bar fighting and lots of chicks. And anyway, I had that reputation in town. And so that was what my daily routine was. And then when I worked, I was very serious about like if I had a contract or if I had something, if I was at a job like well, first of all, before I get into that, I also had like a hotel and a bar and several businesses that I owned in town as well. So I was busy, I stayed busy. I like being busy. I don't like being a lazy ass. And I partied hard, but I worked really hard too. It wasn't like I just partied all the time. I worked really hard to maintain all that stuff. But then when I'd have like a murder contract or a freelance job that I was doing, I would research it and like isolate myself. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to see anybody until the job was finished, because it was a lot of people think like I hated it when I had a contract. I hated it when I had a job I was going to do, because I was really stressed out. It stressed me out, the thought of killing someone. I wanted everything to go well. I didn't want everything. I don't know. It wasn't something that was like pleasant to me at all. It was very unpleasant. And I'll explain it like this. I'd like the opportunity to explain it. Let's say, Shaun and your listeners, that I brought you a human piece of shit on a plate and I present it before you. And then beside it, I have a bag that has 5 million pounds or $5 million, however you want, whatever currency you want, like a lot of money. And I say to you, if you'll eat this shit, I'll give you these $5 million, and then you'll be free for the rest of your life. You don't have to do anything else. I think most people listening, if they're honest with themselves, would eat shit for 5 million pounds or $5 million. I think they would. I would. If you brought me a piece of shit and told me I could eat it and have $5 million, I'd do it right. I'd eat it right now. Now hear me out. That doesn't mean that I like to eat shit, and it doesn't mean that you like to eat shit. It just means that we're willing to do that unpleasant thing to be financially free. And that's how I explain contract killing to you. It was like eating shit. I didn't want to do it, but it was just what had to be done in order to gain that financial freedom. It certainly wasn't something I was required to do. It was something that I did that was wrong, but I'm just explaining it how it was, So that was more or less how my life was back in those days, doing bad things and then spending a month partying afterwards, and a month like working really hard. I like to work. I like working in the Caribbean sun. I like being out in the jungle a lot. I also liked being on the island with a bunch of crazy bastards that live on the island too. And so, I'll tell you, there's only two good times that I remember from that time, from the year 2004 until the year 2010. There was only like two really good stretches. But one of those 6-month stretches of like really good times was when I had the Jolly Roger Social Club. I built the Jolly Roger Social Club in 2008 and had it for 2 years. And let me explain it to you first. It was a bar that was built over the water. It was maybe 1,500 square feet on both levels. It was a 2-story bar. Downstairs in the center, it was all open on 3 sides. The back wall was paneled, wooden paneled, and it was completely built out of wood. It was built over the water on posts, so you could drive right up to the bar and tie the boat up, because there's no road to it. You had to, It was built all out of pressure treated lumber. We put the posts in the ground and built the thing on top of it. I didn't build a bit of it. I didn't swing a hammer on it. I didn't drive a nail in it. But I oversaw the construction of it with my good friend, who was a building contractor, and he built it for me there. A guy named Danny. Anyway, he built the most beautiful bar I've ever seen in my life out of a lot of hardwoods that I had there on the property. We had them sawed.
Hey, do you know what that sound means? Ooh, that's something I've been hearing a lot lately. I can't help but love that. That's what I hear when I make another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. The Pokemon business I've recently started with someone is absolutely thriving thanks to Shopify. Shopify accepts all kinds of payments, and sometimes it's complex when you get on a platform, but their dashboard makes it completely simple. Covering all your sales channels, from a shopfront-ready POS system to its all-in-one e-commerce platform, Shopify even gets you selling across social media marketplaces like Facebook, Insta, TikTok, and YouTube. Full of the industry-leading tools ready to ignite your growth, Shopify gives you complete control over your business and your brand without learning new skills in design or coding. And thanks to award-winning help and with an extensive business course library, Shopify is ready to support your success every step of the way. So when it comes to dealing with people all over the world, Shopify is absolutely enabling us to smash it with our Pokemon business. Before Shopify, our Pokemon card business was in the dark ages. It's time to get serious about selling and get Shopify today. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/Shaun, SHAUN, all lowercase. Go to shopify.co.uk/Shaun, SHAUN, to take your business to the next level today. Shopify.co.uk/Shaun. Link in description box below this video on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Back to the podcast.
And he built this horseshoe-shaped bar. You entered from the back, and it looked just like a horseshoe. And it was really narrow and long. And we had stools built and tables and stuff, all built out of hardwoods. Beautiful. I mean, just gorgeous. And the floor was like decking. It was just like deck boards, So if you wanted to clean everything, you just threw soap on the laundry detergent on the floor and took a brush and scrubbed it clean. It was really easy to clean. Then threw water on it, and that was it. His and hers bathrooms to the left, the kitchen to the right in the back, and the rest of it was all open floor with tables and stuff. I built this game. Let's talk about first upstairs. There was a workroom. Half of the upstairs was a workroom or a storage area for storing food and stuff, or to dry food, and a work area. And then there was 2 hotel rooms with air conditioning. So if you come in, like a lot of times, you come and get so drunk that you can't leave because you've got to drive a boat in the nighttime, and it's a very difficult thing to do, dangerous thing to do in the Caribbean. So a lot of people just like, fuck it, let me crash here, There's a bed upstairs and $40 and $50, I don't remember what. I think one was 40, and one had twin beds and one had a king size bed. And it was nice. They were tiled. Nice rooms. Very nice. Danny did a good job building it. Beyond good job. Beautiful place. Light fixtures were uniquely made. Just a wonderful place all the way around. Anyway, so this place was a party. place from hell. It was only open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It was closed Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And the reason I built it was because there was this eccentric crowd of American expatriates, gringos, that lived in the area. There were maybe like 40 of us total. And we needed a place to party. And so, like, if you live way out in the jungle like that, you're eccentric. I mean, you know, some of them are hippies, some of them are fugitives, some of them are hiding from other things, but everybody's something quote unquote wrong with all of us, which makes for a really cool club, you know, makes a really cool, neato place. Anybody was welcome. Also, I put five mooring balls out. And if you don't know what that is, it's a thing to tie a sailboat or a small yacht up to in a protected area. And I'd rent them for like, I don't know, not very much, $100 a month or something. And people come and tie up their boat there and stay there. And so we always had this, you know, group of scallywags, so to speak, pirates, hanging out there. And like on a Friday night, like it was such a party place, like, and there was no rules or anything. It wasn't. I didn't have a bar, didn't have a license. It wasn't nothing. There was so far away, so far out. There was no government. I never saw a government official there, never, of any kind, not just a policeman. I never saw any government official of any kind ever. Sometimes I'd see the Navy boys, the Panamanian Navy boys, chasing drug boats, but that's it. And like on a Friday night, like we'd crank the thing up on Friday night, and sometimes our parties would last 3 days, literally. Now, Sunday morning, I gave the words of wisdom. I had this Viking helmet that I made I had a Harley Davidson, so I had this Viking helmet. I made it myself, actually. There's a famous picture of it somewhere online. You can find it, I'm sure. And I would give the words of wisdom. I'd write down some dirty poem or something, and people would literally come to hear the words of wisdom. I'd stand on a box like on a milk crate inside the horseshoe-shaped bar and give the words of wisdom, and I'd have my little quote-unquote church there. So we just had a lot of parties. I mean, like, there was nothing, like, I had white, as you call it, underneath the bar, Colombian Bam Bam under the bar. You want to run a zipper of Colombian Bam Bam, I don't know, let's say it's like $25, like right there on the bar. But chop it out on the bar, a good one. And like, there was like a lot. I mean, there was no rules. Girls naked everywhere all the time. You know, there was some cute chicks come inside. We would invite them to take their clothes off and party with us. You know, so I mean, there's no rules of any kind, and it was just this wonderful place. And I had it for about 2 years, and it was like my sanctuary, you know, from the world. I would go there, and you know nothing's going to happen while you're there, because I mean, like, and that's the nice thing about having your own bar. You can be as big an ass or as big of a drunk or as big of a fuck up you want to be, because nobody can throw you out of your own bar. It was mine. And it had the reputation of being the most exclusive and insane club in Bocas. And so, like, it wasn't nothing on Friday night for us to have 60, 70 people in that tiny place, packed, and, you know, good music. And I had this game. I invented this game, right? So I cut a tree stump, a very hard Nispro tree stump. And if you don't know anything about Nispro is the only wood that won't float. It sinks like iron. It's so heavy. And I had it put over there, and I bought, like, I don't know, thousands and thousands of 16 penny nails and a 1 pound hammer. And so let's say there's 3 guys and me, the bar owner. I go set up 4 nails, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's a game. Everybody I just drive the nails in just until they're stuck, just until they've caught in the wood, and so it won't fall down. Everybody gets 1 lick with the 1 pound hammer. And the nail that's driven in the furthest is the one that wins, and the nail that's sticking up the most is the one that has to buy the round of drinks. I got very good at that game, as you can imagine. And so we would play that game over and over and over and over again, and it was a good way to get people buying drinks as well. But then sometimes it'd be rounds where 20 guys were playing that game. There'd be 20 nails. And so the guy that lost, that's like $100 round or more, way more than $100 round, the guy that loses. And so it was fun, and always a lot of beautiful girls there, a lot of crazy ass, beautiful tourist girls there. Some local girls, but it wasn't a local bar. It was an expat bar. It was mostly foreigners, and they were the local girls that were there were usually like girlfriends or wives of some of the boys that were there, some of the fellows that showed up. And so, but we had a really good time. There was only one in 2 years, one fight in that bar. And that whole time period, and so it was a really fun place. It was a safe place, even though it was a crazy place. Nobody ever got hurt. there. I don't ever remember hearing anybody wrecking a boat on the way home. And like, if you was really drunk, I just wouldn't let you go home. Be like, no, man, I'm taking your keys. You got to step upstairs, and that's just it. I'll come give you your keys back tomorrow to the boat, so you can't go home. You just got to stay. But no, most people didn't want to leave. You know, we partied all day. We partied all night long until tomorrow, and wake up, hair of the dog, and go again. So it was a really fun place. I used to work with like the Panamanian version of the FBI or MI5. It's called the DIJ, DJ. That's what it's called, DJ. And so I used to work with the DJ. They would help me find like rich fugitives that, like, I mean, obviously corrupt officials within, I didn't work with the government. I worked with corrupt officials of the Panamanian version of the FBI or MI5. And so this guy that I used to work with, they helped me locate rich fugitives to kill and consume their wealth. This guy called me and said, hey, you're in deep shit. They put out an arrest warrant for you. A question warrant. It's not even an arrest warrant. It's like a warrant for a question, but I can't stand up to questioning. I'm a fugitive from the United States, you know. So I ran, and I went to Costa Rica. And he told me, he said, don't worry about it. Get out of here in 6 months. I'll fix this and come back. And I believed him because I was profitable for him. You know, he was making $100,000 a year off of helping me. So and like $100,000 in Panama is a lot of money. And so especially for some Panamanian cop, you know. So I went to Costa Rica, and I was there for about 6 weeks in a little town that I knew there up in the mountains next to an active volcano, Turrialba. And in Turrialba, I was in this little cabin that I had there, and I turned the television on, and on the Costa Rican news was my face looking back at me, and it said El Salvaje Bill, which translates to Savage Bill or Wild Bill, the most looked after, the most besought sicario, like hitman in Central American history, believed to be responsible for hundreds of deaths. And I was like, oh my God. And the phone started ringing, my cell phone, you know, and I'm like, oh shit. So I answered it, and the first one's a neighbor, and he's like, did you see the news? I'm like, no. And I'm like, I just hung up, and I'm like, and I gotta get the fuck out of here, you know. So I crammed my girlfriend in the car, a bag that had about $32,000 in it, a 38 special, a 38 caliber pistol, and like 2 changes of clothes, and left everything else. And I thought to myself, if I can get to Bluefields in Nicaragua, where I have some friends with who are embedded in the Nicaraguan military, I'll be okay. If I can just get there. And Bluefields was on the Caribbean coast and didn't have, at this time, it does now, but at this time it didn't have a road to the rest of it was like its own little country. It was like a little bitty Jamaica. And I deal very well with the Afro-Caribbean culture and the Afro-Caribbean people. I have always got along really well with them. So they're like Jamaicans. They speak Patois English. The whole Caribbean coast of Central America is like that, actually. People don't realize that. Like the whole Caribbean coast from Nicaragua down to Panama is inhabited entirely by like ex-Jamaicans. People who were at one time there, who were brought over in English slavery and then released. So I like trembling. Like I can't even begin to tell you, like how that, I can't even begin to tell you how that feels if you've never been through it. The whole world, like the country, they had roadblocks set up and everything looking for me. So I'm going down these dirt roads. I've got this is way before GPS or anything like that. So I've got a road map of Costa Rica, and I'm driving down these back roads trying to get to a boat, like a boat dock, in this little town called Puerto Viejo de Saripiqui. Puerto Viejo de Saripiqui is a town on a very large river that goes up and joins the river that becomes the border of Costa Rica and Nicaragua. And so I got there. I got to the river, and I got to a little cabin up on the river. But then I got captured by the Nicaraguan military in that place like 2 weeks later, and I was taken to Managua on a long boat ride, like a A lot of things happened along that way. It's like too much to even tell, but I mean, like, it was a 2-week odyssey, and that at the end of it, finally getting captured. I was trying to make it into deep into Nicaragua and over to the Caribbean coast, and I just didn't get there. I got captured by the Nicaraguans in a Nicaraguan war zone because Nicaragua and Costa Rica were in a fight during that time. And so they took me to Managua, and remember that Nicaragua was aligned with the Soviet Union and the Russians, and like even their cars are Ladas, you know, they're not Western style cars, not Toyotas and shit like that. Their government still drives old Soviet, and they use AK-47s, they don't use M16s, they use AK-47s and stuff. They use Soviet equipment, and their interrogation tactics are Soviet interrogation tactics, which include locking you in a dark room for 3 or 4 days without food, bringing you out, beating the living shit out of you from your from your shoulders to your hips, where they can put a shirt on you and take pictures of you and say that there's nothing wrong with you. Well, that happened to me. That the interrogation actually went like this. I had been crammed in, been drugged through the jungle for 3 days without any food or water. Water, yes. I actually drank water out of the river. Drugged through the jungle on a boat, finally making it to Managua. Not by land, by boat. In Managua, they crammed me into a dark cell, took me out of the cell. The guy says to me, "You're going to confess to these crimes that you did in Nicaragua." I'm like, "I've never been in Nicaragua. I never killed anybody in Nicaragua. What the hell are you talking about?" So he produces like things he wants me to sign, and one of them was a murder that happened in 1999. The first time I ever even left the United States was 2003. I'm like, "What the fuck?" And so I told him, "Go fuck yourself. I'm not signing anything." And so then they bring in these little kids, these little cops with like baseball bats that have like foam wrapped around them, and they beat the shit out of you with them, you know. But like I said, they know what they're doing. They chain you on a post. They chain your hands above your head, and they beat you. You're like your rib cage and shit until you get so sore, you know. And every time they just barely touch you, it hurts. They put you up. They bring you back in 6 or 7 days and do it again and do it again and do it again. And so anyway, I don't know how long I was there. I think it wasn't very long. I think it was like only like a week, if you want the truth. But it seemed like a year. And when the Panamanians came and asked me, the Panamanians came and talked to me, and they said, voluntarily, you can go back and confront Panamanian justice. And he said, "I don't know what they're doing to you here, but I can only imagine. And in Panama, they're not going to do that to you. I mean, you're not going to get this. You're at least they're going to treat you like, you know, better than this." And I said, "Man, get me the fuck out of here. I'll go with you anywhere just to get out of here." So they strapped me into a plane and brought me back to the Republic of Panama.
What is the worst thing you've ever seen in prison?
You know, I've seen a lot of bad things. A lot of people killed, a lot of gun violence, a lot of... It's just everything here. There's a lot of things that are bad here. But one of the worst things I've ever seen here was this kid named Steven. This is one of the saddest stories, actually. Although the ending of it is a little positive anyway. There's a kid that came into the old David public prison in like maybe in 2014. And I say a kid, he was probably 30 years old, but he was slow. He wasn't like mentally retarded. He was just like, I think his IQ level was really low, you know? Like he could dress and feed himself, and he looked normal, and you spoke to him, he spoke back normally, but I don't know how to describe it. He was just slow. And he didn't have Down syndrome or anything like that, but he was slow. Let's just say that. And he had some problems. Like the cells there were communal, big communal cells that had like 40 people in them, and they would put Stephen in one cell, and he would begin screaming at 3 o'clock in the morning because he was afraid. And you know, and then the guys would be like, after a few days of that, they're sick of him, so they throw him out of the cell. And then they put him in another cell, and the same thing happens again, you know. And also because prison's a terrible place, people pick on him. And Stephen had a caregiver in the street, and he killed his caregiver with a rock, like smashed his caregiver. I don't know who it was. I don't know the story enough to tell you. But I also know that anybody that sat down with Stephen for 5 minutes knows that he's not mentally capable of being a standing trial. I mean, what kind of an idiot would send him to prison? You would send him to an asylum or something. Anyway, so the great Panamanian prison system's solution to this problem was to chain Stephen to the door of the clinic, which was inside the prison. It was an inside. It wasn't, you didn't get rained on or anything, but he was chained to an ankle, like an ankle chain, from his ankle to the door, and he had about 4 or 5 feet of chain, maybe 6 feet of chain, and that was Stephen's world. He 24 hours a day he was chained to the front of the clinic, and like a lot of bad things would happen to Stephen. As I said, people picked on him because he was different, slow, not normal, what you'd call normal, and so that's one thing. But then the guards there was this big fat guard named Nunez, big bald-headed fat guard, and the reason I know so much about this situation is because when I lived there, I had this really nice cell that was right in front of the clinic, and so I could see all that was going on. And Nunez's fat, worthless ass would come by every night and like, this is the conversation. Stephen had to defecate and urinate right there in front of the clinic because he didn't have anywhere else to shit or piss, did he? Because he's chained to the doors. So when he has to shit, what is he supposed to do? And so he just like humps up there like a dog and shits on the concrete, and then has to sleep beside the shit all night. So Nunez would come by at night and be like, "Why have you shit here by the door, you nasty bastard?" And then he would take his billy club, his stick, his baton, and beat the shit out of Stephen. And I remember, and the thing that made me so sick was not even that the guard was beating him, is that the other prisoners, that were watching were like cheering the guard on to beat the poor, retarded kid. It wasn't retarded, but I mean the slow kid. And I thought to myself many times in that cell, I wish there was some way that I could like kill all of these fucking people, all of them, because it was just the most sick and disgusting thing I've ever seen. So Stephen came in and he was almost normal when he came in, but now he starts to degenerate considerably, and he developed this extremely disgusting habit of masturbating like, 15 times a day. And the nurses who worked in the clinic were perfectly fine with a human being like being chained like a dog to the door, but when he started masturbating, it was just too much for their consciences. And so they asked that something be done with poor Stephen. And so they took him and they literally chained him to a post out underneath the rancho, which is like outside. And Stephen lived for about 6 months of his life chained to a post like a dog, and he began to literally act like a dog. He began to try to bite people and like try to grab people as they walked by and shit like that. And I remember one day I was walking by and he tried to bite me, and like he tried to bite my leg, and I stepped away, and one of the prisoners said to me, "Hey Bill, you gonna let him get away with that? Kick his ass." And I said to the guy, I said, "If I ever see anybody in my presence hit that kid, or if I know anybody hit that poor kid, I am going to beat the ever-living shit out of them." And everybody was like, "What? Why?" I'm like, "Can you not find any in your heart? Can you not find any mercy for I mean, he's like he's not like us. I mean, he's a poor bastard chained to a post, man." And so, like, I would buy him, like, ice cream and stuff, even though he would, like, snatch it away from me and just eat it like Gollum, like, over in the corner eating, like Gollum eats a fish. He was, like, eating the ice cream, but maybe it gave him some kind of pleasure. And so I began a campaign there with the help of the head guard to get him out of there. And finally, I got a district attorney to come and talk to me, and the district attorney that was over his case came to talk to me, and he was like really snooty about it. He was like, "Wow, who are you to say who's mentally capable?" And I'm like, "Listen, you stupid motherfucker." I mean, like that's what I told him. "Listen, you stupid motherfucker." I'm like, "Why don't you come back here and take a walk with me?" So we walked back and looked at Stephen there, like laying on the ground like a dog. And I'm like, does he look like mentally capable of standing trial? And so after like a bunch of petitions, they finally came and took him to what is called a manicomio, like a lunatic asylum or whatever. And I don't know if his stay in there was any better than it was in the prison, but it had to be better. It had to be better than the prison. So I mean, like, I watched this kid be tortured for a year, and I tried every way in the world to do something about it, and everybody thought I was crazy because I wanted to help him. Like, they just couldn't even believe that somebody, like, why would you want to help the crazy, you know? And so, but the Panamanians are pretty cruel anyway. They're cruel to animals. They're cruel to each other. You know, that's a pretty normal thing here. So, but I think that in my heart, that's the worst thing that I ever saw. That's even worse than, you know, like the murders and stuff. That's bad, but that's over with. You know, it goes boom, boom, and it's done. But this guy was tortured for a year that way, and so that's the worst thing I ever saw in prison.
Earlier on, you mentioned getting caught by the Nicaraguan military. How did you get caught by the military, the Nicaraguan? Exactly what happened? Where were you? What happened? Was there a boat, did you say, before the torture? Could you give us the full story, please?
Without a doubt, that was one of the darkest periods of my life. Maybe, I guess there's no way around saying it was the worst. And maybe the reason I didn't speak much about it is because it's like painful to even remember. But here's what happened. I was hiding in a place called Trinidad. And the reason it was called Trinidad is because there are three rivers that come together to make the San Juan River. The San Juan River comes from one side. There was another Costa Rican river, I don't remember. And then, of course, the San Juan River continues on. So it's like a junction. It's like really a junction of two rivers to make a bigger river. And they called it Trinidad because there's like three rivers. There's three ways you can go. So I was hanging out there cool, you know, and the Costa Rican side, on the Costa Rican side, it reached to my attention that the Costa Rican police were looking for me. And so I moved down the river to an island that was in the river, an actual island in the river, a fairly large one. And I had no idea that Costa Rica and Nicaragua were fighting, like not with guns, but like fighting politically over that piece of land. And I was there for a couple of days, and when I was there, the Nicaraguans decided they were because they have a military. You know, the Nicaraguans have a military. The Costa Ricans don't actually have a military. They have just a police force. And so the Nicaraguans invaded the island while I was there, and they just like hog-tied me up and carried me back to their military encampment. This story is really, really complicated, and to be perfectly honest with you, even today I don't understand it myself. I don't understand how some of the things happened, and I'll never know, I guess. Apparently somebody on the Costa Rican side had saw me, you know, when I was buying gasoline for the generator in the little place where I was staying. And I talked to the Nicaraguan the major of the Nicaraguan military and made a deal with him. They literally hog-tied me with my hands behind my back and beat the shit out of me and took me to talk to this guy. So they take me and they said, "You're a drug trafficker because in your house we found guns and money, like lots of money, like for them anyway, $32,000 in cash and a 38 special." And I said, "I'm not a drug trafficker. You didn't find any drugs." And being honest, I'm not a drug trafficker. And he said, "Well, how can you account for the $32,000?" And I said, "I can't account for $32,000. I can account that I have $16,000 and that you have $16,000. And he blinked. And he said, "We've made a terrible mistake. We've arrested an innocent man." And he ordered everybody out of the room. And so I thought, well, I'm going to get away with it, you know. I was still going to get away because I wasn't that far from Bluefields where I was trying to get to, where I have real help. Anyway, so they take me loose, and I literally, on the table there, counted out the money. Like, one for you, one for me, one for you, one for me, one for you, one for me. And so this guy, we're like laughing, and everything's okay. And he asked me, "What about your nose?" Because they broke my nose. So what about your bloody nose? I didn't break it, but it was bloody. "What about your nose?" And you know, and like gave him the shit beat out of you. And I said, "It's the damnedest thing. I was walking down my dock and I fell down." And he said, "Well, as long as we understand each other." And so he said, so everything was cool, and they let me go, and they even gave me my pistol back. I stuck my pistol back in it was a revolver. I stuck my revolver back in my waistband. Now, it's important before we continue to understand a couple of things about the culture of Costa Rica and Nicaragua. Costa Rica, without a doubt, has the very best human rights record, political record of all Latin America, not just Central America, of all South America, every country. It's a first world nation, no doubt. I mean, 100%. Costa Rica is a first world nation. It's a good place to go. If anybody's listening, want to go travel, you want to, you know, it's a safe, if you want to see the rainforest, it's a safe country to do that in. 100% safe. I mean, I would send my children there, no problem. Nicaragua's like the opposite. It's literally it's a holdover from the old Soviet Latin America. It's a holdover. You know, they use Soviet equipment. Literally use old pre-91 Soviet equipment still, and their government is set up in a Soviet style. I mean, Daniel Ortega is the president, is the dictator there, basically, like Maduro in Venezuela. It's the same shit, but worse. Nicaragua's even worse. Anyway, so apparently the Costa Ricans, I didn't know this, and now I'm hamming it up there with the Major Sanchez was his name. I'm hamming it up there, you know, having a drink in his office, smoking a cigarette. I just gave him $16,000, and I took $16,000. He handed me back my pistol. The Costa Ricans have asked Teletica, which is the Costa Rican police, have asked Teletica, which is the biggest news agency in Costa Rica, if they can loan them their helicopter, and the police have commandeered a Teletica news helicopter and are running up and down the river looking for me. I didn't know this. Nobody knew this. How could I know this? Anyway, so while I'm standing there, on the other side of the river is Costa Rica, and the river's only about a half a football pitch wide, half a football field long. So, 50 yards, let's say, long. Not very wide, And on the other bank, they begin to mass police looking over at us, and the Nicaraguans begin to act because they think that the war has come, because they're like, both of them are posturing in a warlike manner, and so nobody knew, and even I didn't know that it had anything to do with me. So the helicopter flies over the river, and the boys, the Nicaraguan boys, all raised their AK-47s ready to fire on it. And I just had this sinking feeling. I'm like, I just said to myself, that's for me. And a police officer stuck a bullhorn out the window, like an amplified bullhorn out the window, and said, "En tu posesión está el salvaje vil." In your possession is Wild Bill. And he continued in Spanish, saying that he's the most wanted criminal in all Central America, blah blah blah. So I turned to speak to the major and say, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. And when I did, somebody hit me in the back of the head with something. I imagine it was the stock of an AK-47, and I didn't know anything else for a long time. So there I woke up. When I woke up, everything was, my head hurt, and I was crammed into the corner of some little stall-like area, like where you did have a horse. And I remember that my girlfriend at the time was with me. The girl that I was living with was with me, and so she was crying. And I asked her immediately, "Did you get raped?" And she said, "No, they haven't done anything to me." She didn't have handcuffs on or anything. I didn't have handcuffs on either. I was tied with like baling twine, behind my back. My hands behind my back, and my feet were also tied. So we lay there for a long time, and I don't know, lieutenant or somebody, some underling of the major, stuck his head in the door, and just to see if we're there. And I'm like, "Hey, when are we getting out of here? What's going on?" And he's like, "There's a boat coming for you." So from Bluefields, where I wanted to go, a boat left, and it took 8 hours or so to get there. And then it got there, and we were going to go up the San Juan River until we get to Managua, which was a 72-hour journey. So when the boat got there, they cut you can see this footage. This footage is online, actually. They cut my feet and carried me and my girlfriend down and crammed us into a boat, and up the river we went. And they literally just set us in the front of the boat, and that was it. They didn't give us any food. They didn't give us any water. I reached over with my hand and got water out of the river to drink after about, the first 12 hours. So we went 3 days and nights without anything to eat and nowhere to sleep. I mean, they would stop at like an outpost. And when I say an outpost, like a shack. They would stop at a shack and change personnel, and the boat would continue on. And it literally took, I don't know, maybe it took 48 hours. Maybe it was 2 nights. There was at least 2 nights in there. And I remember, the towns got bigger as we got closer to Managua. And you get out on Lake Nicaragua, and then, and it's almost like an ocean. So, Lake Nicaragua is the biggest lake in Central America. It's a very large lake. So we get there, and they cram us into the back of a pickup truck and take us to like a debriefing place or something, like a place where they interrogate you. And the Americans came to see me. American Embassy came to see me. And there was a lady, and I don't know if they were playing good cop, bad cop or whatever, but I mean, the lady was really nice. The lady, she was a young woman. She's like 25 years old, and she's a beautiful woman, like beautiful 25-year-old woman. And this old CIA guy, or, he was definitely a spook of some kind. And so we're talking, and I told the CIA guys I want to go back to America, because I knew in my heart that if I get back in the United States, none of the shit that is against me would ever stick, because none of that evidence was collected by the FBI or anything. It was connected by a bunch of yahoos down here in Central America. That evidence would never be admissible in an American court. So I wanted to go back to the United States. And the CIA guy, I don't know if he's a CIA guy, but the spook, I'm just going to call him a spook. A spook is a slang term for a spy, American spy. I don't know if he was CIA. He'd have to be CIA. He would have to be CIA. He says, well, I'm going to leave him. We want to leave you here, and we want the Nicaraguans to kill you. That's what he said. And I said, well, why don't you go fuck yourself? And he was surprised, after 3 days and night of not eating, to see and being treated poorly, to see that sort of, I could see it in his face. He was very surprised and angered to see that kind of resistance. And I said, I want to go back to this. Anyway, so the lady was really like abhorred. She was like horribly like surprised in an ugly way, in a bad way, surprised in an angry way that the Nicaraguans hadn't given us any food. So she went to like a